Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining me again. As many of you have pointed out to me, it's been a while since we last did a Marc Ribot themed video. So let's change that today. We're going to learn, dissect and analyse his fantastic solo from Tom Waits' Dead and Lovely. And as it's such a short solo, we're going to extend it by doing a lead study of our own, where we apply a lot of the same principles and ideas. So if you're a fan of moody, eccentric, blues, jazz, noir playing, then stick around. As always, there's a lot of Coltrane marks playing here, and in this particular solo we can really hear that Django influence. So let's jump straight in and let's look at the first phrase over the C minor chord. So we're in the key of C minor, and this is vaguely a 1-4-5 blues type of progression, and we're starting on the 1. Now the first and most important thing to outline is your simple C minor arpeggio. Let's do it in this position here, outlining this C minor bar chord. Now starting from the root, this would be your C minor arpeggio within that zone. Root, flat 3, 5, root, flat 3, 5. We can also add that 5 in on that low E, of course. And I highly recommend that you do that with these shapes to maximize the range of the instrument. You know, we have 6 strings, we may as well fill them all. And of course the simple thing to remember is that whatever's on the top E can come down to the low E, no questions asked. So now in ascending order, we have this. 5th, root, flat 3, 5th, root, flat 3, 5th. And do practice ascending and descending these shapes with every possible fingering you could think of. Outlining that portion of the chord shape, for example. Or rolling that third finger between the D and G strings. Also take note of your triad stacks within this zone and how they branch off to the right and to the left of that central location. Now even with just those notes, there's almost an infinite possibility of things you could play. But let's look at what Marc does to take that to the next level. Now these are things that in the jazz world are often referred to as 1-2-3-5 arpeggios, or Coltrane patterns, named after John Coltrane of course. And it really is as simple as it sounds. You take your chord, you isolate the 1, the 2, the 3 and the 5. So in the case of C minor, 1, 2, flat 3 of course because it's minor, 5. So we've added a 2 to those notes that we had previous. So if we did that all the way through that shape, again starting from the lowest possible place, you'd have this. 5, 1, 2, flat 3, 5, 1, 2, flat 3, 5. Immediately very musical and emotive sounding. Now clearly the most efficient way to go about learning this stuff is to have your triads and arpeggios mapped out very clearly first of all, and then just simply supplement those shapes with the 2. So definitely do your homework on this and move this around to different locations. For example, C minor off the low E string, your basic arpeggio, 1, flat 3, 5, 1, flat 3, 5, 1, flat 3. Add the 2, 1, 2, flat 3, 5, 1, 2, flat 3, 5, 1, 2, flat 3. And as usual, I would recommend breaking this down into the caged system to thoroughly map out the entire fingerboard. Those would have been just 2 of the 5 shapes, the A shape and the E shape. Now because I'm feeling generous, I'm going to show you the others as well, and these will all be included in the lesson materials. So the G shape, C minor arpeggio, with the 2 added. The D shape, C minor arpeggio, with the 2 added. And then finally the C shape. Here's the basic C minor arpeggio, with the 2 added. Now I know we've only learned the first phrase and we've already gone down a bit of a rabbit hole about triads and arpeggios, but all of those same concepts are now going to be reused and recycled over and over throughout the rest of this solo. So if you can really get that stuff down, that's most of your prep work done. And do remember that the sole intention here is not just to learn someone else's solo note for note, But it's to understand the concepts that they're applying so that when you improvise, you can use some of these same ideas and get these same beautiful sounds. Another big bumper pack of lesson materials with this one. Not only Marc's solo and my lead study tabbed and notated, but also all of those shapes we went over earlier, the minor arpeggios and the like. As always, I provide these things in Guitar Pro and PDF formats, and wherever possible, I embed and synchronize my audio with the Guitar Pro file. And of course, my backing track will also be included. If you want to get hold of these lesson materials, there are 2 links in the video description. The first one takes you to my Patreon, where for a very small monthly cost, you get access to all of my lesson materials, past, present and future, including tons of bonus lessons and extras, or head to the Gumroad link if it's just this one lesson in particular that you'd like to get hold of. Either way, it's your support that makes these videos possible, so thank you. Okay, so back to the solo. Phrase 1. Now that you know the concept, hopefully you can see it clear as day. The 5, the 1, the 2 and the flat 3. The beauty of adding the 2 before the flat 3, of course, is it gives you the chance to slide in to that flat 3, or hammer on, or bend. Then the second half of that phrase is just the same concept again, 1 octave higher. 5, 1, 2, flat 3, back down. And then an enclosure around that 5. I'm going to do a full video on enclosures very soon, but as a very brief summary here, you can take any of your triad notes, these are your landmarks, and you can surround them or enclose them with other notes. For example, a semitone below each of those notes. Again, that brings in that 2, doesn't it? Or a scale degree above each note. That's the one we're using in this phrase. Both. Immediately gives it some of that gypsy flavour. Now continuing on with the solo, he comes down from the flat 3 via the 2 to the 1, back to the 5th with that same enclosure again. And then he sees F minor coming up on the horizon, plays the flat 3 of C minor, and then the root of F minor right on the downbeat of that chord's arrival. So essentially thinking C minor, F minor. And then what he plays over the F minor, he's already played the 1, then again the 2, going to the flat 3, and then the 5. So this would be part of your C shape. And then he adds another very common gypsy touch to that chord. He adds the 6th on top of the minor. So we're thinking F minor 6, which is a beautiful chord that if you've watched any of my videos, you'll know that I use very often. So far now, over the F minor, we've got this pool of notes to select from. 1, 2, flat 3, 5, 6. Very colourful. So here's what he plays. 3, 4. And then resolves to C minor by targeting that 5th. Now staying on the C minor, and again thinking 1, 2, 3, 5 arpeggio, he plays this. 5, 1, 2, bend to the flat 3 this time, and redo that bend over and over. And then sliding into the 5th. So all of this would be within your G shape. And then again, using nothing but that 1, 2, 3, 5 sound, he plays. Then the F minor comes back. F minor arpeggio within the C shape. Root, flat 3, 5, root. Connecting up to the top 2 notes of an F minor triad. A bit of that sidestepping enclosure type stuff we speak about. And then back to C minor, again, 2 notes from a triad. Like all good improvisers, notice how Marc's awareness of where he is over the changes is absolutely spot on. He's never late to a chord change, in fact sometimes anticipating a chord change before it arrives. And this is really the whole premise when it comes to playing over changes, and it's often the thing people struggle with, making sure that you know the underlying chord changes well enough that you can at least be one move ahead at all times. So that would be the end of Marc's solo, but we're going to press on and learn my lead study, which applies all of those ideas and many more. So we're playing over these changes next: C minor, A flat 7. And then it resolves: A flat 7, G7, C minor. That's a very typical Tom Waits style progression. I think of it as a 1, a sharp 5, and then the 5, and then the 1. Very fun to play over as well. So over the C minor, we're going to play this bluesy phrase, top 2 notes of a C minor triad, bending that B string a little, then down the minor pentatonic. Now we're thinking A flat 7, so we grab notes that would be in the chord. Flat 7, the 3rd, the 5th, the 6th, sliding to the flat 7. Back down, and then back to C minor, where we're thinking blues scale. And we use one of my very favourite tricks, which I've taught tons of times in these videos, but I'll go over it again. Root on top, keep it there, and then explore the blues scale while keeping that ringing. That kind of stuff. Always sounds really mean. Then back to the A flat 7. 3 notes from an A flat 7 chord. The flat 7, the 5th, and the 3rd. Back to C minor. Another way of doing that same kind of trick I spoke about earlier. Started off with the bottom and top notes of a C minor triad. So thinking of this shape, but hollowing out the middle to reveal this interval of a 6th between the 5th and the flat and 3rd. And then, again, very similar to that thing we did there, but on the other side of the shape, so within kind of shape 1 of your C minor blues scale. So I'm borrowing the top 3 strings and playing the 11th fret of the G string, hitting all 3 together, sliding to 10 on the G, coming down the scale. Now I'm thinking G7, coming down the arpeggio, 5, 3, root, flat 7, and then going back up to the 3rd and the 5th, back to the 3rd again, and then resolving to C minor. Then blues scale. Now chord progression wise, we're about to be headed back to the top of the form again, which basically means we're going to be playing over 4 bars of C minor. So to get to C minor in style, we're going to play a little turnaround kind of phrase, a 5 resolving to that 1. And we're thinking G7. Now with a G7 chord, of course, you can alter it because it's a dominant chord, so you could have a sharp 5, for example, or flat 9, or both, or sharp 5 with a sharp 9. In this case, we're going to go for the slightly less common flattened 5th, which can sound very tense in a good way. Now there's this really killer dominant flat 5 phrase that I picked up off Matt Munisterry quite a while back, and it goes like this. So if we're thinking G7, you've got the root and the flat 7. There's your flat 5, your tense note. Flat 9 as well. And then repeat the same thing an octave lower. Root, flat 7, flat 5, flat 9, and then the root. Or, in this case, we're thinking of that as resolving to the C minor chord where it's the 5th. So there's C minor landing. Now on the C minor, of course, we're going to be applying some of the same principles Marc was using. So we're going to play the root, the 2, the flat 3, and then the 2 again, but an octave up. We could call that a 9 if you'd prefer. This is something I spoke about in one of my first Ribot videos, which is this idea of getting colourful dissonance and tension with these sorts of intervals. You know, not quite an octave, so it's a 7th. It's quite a tense sounding interval. In this case, C minor, we're thinking flat 3 and 9. Take away all the padding and leave just those 2 notes, and suddenly it's a lot more tense. I often like to move that top note down an octave as well, Barney Kessel style. Now we're going to dial that tension up to 10 by exploring some C melodic minor scale over this C minor. The major 7th, which over a minor chord sounds very tense, but very pretty, in my opinion. And then, bringing in the sixth, again from the melodic minor. Another very tense sound. Simply go down the scale, and then we're implying C7 as our way of leading to F minor. And this is what I mean about being one step ahead all the time. Knowing that F minor is on the horizon gives you the chance to play into the chord. So I'm superimposing that 5 chord before it arrives. It's not even in the rhythm section, but we're thinking C7 to F minor to make the landing of that F minor chord sound almost inevitable. Now we're descending an F minor triad, flat 3 and 2 again, enclosure before the root, 2 flat 3, sliding up to the 2, very pretty. Resolving to C minor by landing the minor third on beat 1 of that chord. Exploring more of that tense melodic minor sound. Major 7th, major 6th, very tense sounding over that minor chord. Staying on C minor, we climb the scale. Skip a couple of notes, but it's still essentially a melodic minor. We stay within it. Now this kind of thing, you can think of as C melodic minor, but you could also be trying to see the changes that are kind of being implied there. C minor, G7, back to C minor. Very Django-y. Then again, just like before, we see F minor is fast approaching, so we outline and superimpose a C7 chord. This time C7 flat 9, using this diminished arpeggio. So there's your flat 9, your third, your fifth, and your flat 7, resolving beautifully to the flat 3 of F minor, where we then play around and outline the minor 6th kind of tonality again. It's a very pretty sound, especially on the 4 chord, to really imply heavily that minor 6th sound. Connecting down to the minor third of C minor right on that downbeat. So again, always looking ahead to see where we need to get to and tying things together neatly. And then thinking back onto that simple idea of 5, 1, 2 to 3. Bit of enclosure around the root. Now we're heading back into that very typical Tom Waits progression we spoke about. The 1, go into the sharp 5. So the C minor to the A flat 7. On the C minor we play this. Again, where you've got that 2 and flat 3 heavily involved. A flat 7. Back to C minor. A flat 7, we just outlined notes from the chord again. Bluesy style. C minor, back to that cool little trick we spoke about. Then A flat 7 again. C minor. A flat 7. And then over this A flat 7 to G7, I'm really mostly just thinking C minor blues scale. But then bringing in the major third there of the G7 to clearly point that chord out. The 5th of the G7, resolving to the root of the C minor that has now landed. Where we close things out with a C minor triad down low. Bringing in that 2 again, right? 5th, root, flat 3, 2. And then that enclosure before the root of C minor, which goes some way to implying G7, right? You can see it quite clearly there. G major, resolving to C minor. Even if only fleetingly, it's nice to imply a bit of 1-5-1 to create a sense of movement. C minor, G7, C minor. So brief. Again, that's the power of awareness and knowing where all of your triads and intervals are along the fretboard. So that when you need to, you're not looking to grab a whole cumbersome scale or shape, but you might just want one note. The third of G7 is enough to imply the whole chord, and then the root of C minor is enough to imply the resolution. It's all you need sometimes. So there we go, another Marc Ribot study complete. We started with his solo over Dead and Lovely, and then went on to improvise our own solo over those changes, using a lot of his same tricks, but a few of our own tricks and tips. For me, this style of playing really does blend a lot of my favourite elements. You know, everything from the blues players of old, to the gypsy jazz stuff, to a little bit of bop and a bit of country even. And it really does show the benefit of having some real culture in your playing. Don't get stuck within one style. Explore every style you can possibly find and find something to love from within it. Something that you can pull into your own playing and help to create your own unique voice on the instrument. Be open-minded and explore that whole universe of music we have available to us. It will really make you a very compelling player to listen to, trust me. If you've not heard a lot of the Tom Waits stuff that Marc Ribot plays on, do definitely check it out. It's incredibly inspiring. Check out any of the stuff from the 80s onwards. Rain Dogs, Mule Variations, Bone Machine, Blood Money, Alice, Real Gone, which is the album this song was off. And also Swordfish Trombone, which although Marc Ribot doesn't feature on, is very much within this same kind of style, and I think you might dig it. Okay, so a little bit of tone talk, not that there's anything too complicated going on here. This is my 1953 Gibson ES-125 with the original P90 pickup. Everything's dialed all the way up to 10. I have currently got 12 gauge flat wounds on here, although I'm going to change them back to round wounds, which I do prefer. Either way, it's always 12 gauge on this guitar. And today I'm running through my Emprise Falcon amp, which is like the perfect modern version of my vintage deluxe reverb. Oh, and just before I go, please do like and subscribe and leave comments. Honestly, it makes such a big difference to this channel, I can't tell you. Alright guys, well there we go. As always, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I do thank you for spending the time with me. So I'll see you again next week for something completely different. Take care.